Welcome back to the Spark Session. Today we are going to be talking with David Salyers. David is one of my favorite leaders. He is so full of wisdom. He's had an incredible career, has amazing kids, and I think that's a huge measure of success. But we're going to talk about all kinds of things, brand, culture, career decisions. So let's dive right in. David, welcome to the Spark Session.
Well, what a joy it is to be with you. And you know what a big fan I am of you, your husband, this organization, and now your podcast.
We are huge fans of yours. And I told you before we started, but we had this meeting years ago and I sat with David and I took 7 pages of notes from a 1-hour conversation. So I feel like our guests and our listeners are in for a treat.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, let's start by talking about the genesis of your career. Yeah. You came out of college, graduated from the University of Georgia.
Right here in Athens, Georgia.
Right here in Athens. Go Dogs. Yeah. And you had so many opportunities. Tell us about that season.
Yeah, so I need to take you back to me as a 21-year-old kid. I had done really well academically, done really well extracurricularly. I had a lot of good job offers. In fact, I was the kind of kid in college, I was studying on Friday night while everyone else
That is a good student.
So, but it actually creates some problems, and it created a little bit of a trap because when I was graduating, I felt like because I've made all these sacrifices no one else has made, now's my chance to cash in.
You Dave Ramsey did, right?
I'd lived like no one else.
Right.
So now it was my chance to live like no one else.
Mm-hmm.
But that actually created a bit of a blind spot for me in a sense because I had some really good job offers coming out of college. And I had one job offer that was like 70% less than my top offer. And that was from 70%? 70% less from a company called Chick-fil-A. And at age 21, probably for you to even better understand, if I were to tell you my plan, my life plan from a business and career standpoint, I was very clear. You know, I had all of life figured out, as they say. I was going to graduate from college, make as much money as I could, as fast as I could, to retire as early as I could. And I thought the goal of a career was early retirement. And I'd set 35 as my goal. I said,
35.
If I can just be retired by 35, how could life get any better than that? That's
living the
best
dream,
I had.
right?
That was the dream.
Right.
For me. That's like, how could life get any better than that? Mm-hmm. But I sit here before you today and say, I'm so glad that's not my story. Yeah. I'm so glad that's not the way my life played out. And that may come as a shock to some of your listeners, but listen to the rest here. So I was struggling because I had such good offers.
Yeah.
And that one offer that was 70% less from Chick-fil-A, but I don't even know why I was struggling. I think now maybe it was divine intervention or whatever, but I called one of my mentors and explained all this to him, a guy named Dave Kaplan.
Okay.
He's the guy that I'd worked for as a summer intern. And he was a real mentor in my life, very wise. And he said, Salyers, he said, I'm going to come visit you. So literally he drove to Athens, Georgia. We're in what was then the ATO parking lot right across from Sanford Stadium.
Yeah.
And I remember it feels, Brittany, like it was yesterday.
Wow.
But this was years ago. And he sat me down in the parking lot and he told me this. And right now, the only criteria I had for my first job, how much money are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was all, because if my goal was to retire early, make as much money as I could, that's the only thing that mattered.
You needed to start investing.
And I need to start making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I need to start immediately. And I'd made all these sacrifices.
Right.
So in my mind at that point, I was entitled to make all these money because of all the sacrifice. And that was the problem, the sense of entitlement.
Right.
So he said, Salyers, he said, the last thing you need to worry about coming out of college is how much money you make. Well, he's got my attention. Because that's like the only thing I'm thinking about at that point.
Right.
And I think it's where a lot of students get trapped, honestly, because even colleges now kind of talk about you need to go after the job that's paying the most.
That's so true.
And I think that's a real trap, which we could maybe get into later if you want. But he told me, he said, you need to find 4 things. He said, first, he said, put yourself under a leader that you want your life to look like. He said, the leader you put yourself under is a picture of the future you. Are you happy about that picture?
The who.
Hadn't thought about that.
Interesting.
I'm going to also this was Dave Kaplan's advice. I'm going to give you the corollary that Truett would have given me had I known Truett better at the time. Right. But Truett's version of it would have been, you become like those you surround yourself with for better or worse. So be careful who you surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. So I like Truett's definition almost in a little ways better because it's not just the leader you put yourself under, it's the people you put yourself around. And really, it's both of those that you need to be concerned about.
Right.
That's a really important criteria. Who's your leader? Who are you surrounded by? Because that will influence your future dramatically, who you're surrounded by.
Right.
He said, second, he said, the first question you're going to get asked in any social situation is, who do you work for? You know, we all experience that right at college.
That is so
That's the
true.
first question. Who do you
Yes.
work for? He said, are you going to be proud of the answer to that question?
That's
Well, I
great.
hadn't considered that. It was, how much money are you going to pay me? Truett would have said it this way. His life verse was Proverbs 22:1. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. What great advice that was for me as a 21-year-old. Because all I was worried about is great riches.
Right.
And Dave Kaplan and Truett would have told me, worry about the good name. In fact, that was Truett's number one concern throughout the whole time I knew him, is not how much money he had in the bank, is preserving his good name and preserving the good name of Chick-fil-A. And that was a great criteria. Because we'll become not only like the people we're surrounded by, but in a sense, you become the name that you associate yourself with is really important.
Your
too.
name is more valuable than gold.
Yes. So that was the second thing. So first, the leader you put yourself under, people you're surrounded by. Second, does the company you work for have a name you would be honored to represent? Third, he said, each of us are born with a degree of talent. He said, find something you'd be really good at doing. This kind of your natural giftedness. There's a guy named Marcus Buckingham who wrote a book called Now Discover Your Strengths.
Strengths Finder. I love it.
Strength Finders, yes. And so it's a little bit of that. Basically, the concept is all of us are born with strengths. I don't believe born with talent, I don't believe we can give ourselves talent. We're born with it. Our job is to discover our talent. Once we've discovered our talent, then we can do something interesting. We can add skills and we can add knowledge to a talent. And when you add skills and knowledge to a talent, you cultivate a strength. And basically what he was saying is you need to be operating out of your strengths. Because, and this is the problem again, so many college students and me, if you just go for the job that pays the most money, that may not be what you're talented to do.
That's right.
And
you may not enjoy it.
You may not enjoy it. And you may have to work really hard just to be average at it.
Ooh, yeah.
So I think the focus on your talents developed into strengths is a really important part of the criteria.
It's huge.
And then fourth, he said, you need to find something you'd be passionate about doing. And I thought a lot about that through the years. Basically what he was telling me is you need to find a job that charges your battery, not drains it. As I think of passion, I think about things that energize us and charge our battery.
That's good.
Not drain it. And a way to think about it is, what is it when you're doing it? 8 hours feels like 8 minutes. That's an area of passion for you. By the flip side, if 8 minutes feels like 8 hours, you are definitely not in your area of passion.
That's right.
And we spend so much of our time at work. Wouldn't you rather 8 hours feel like 8 minutes than the other way around? Because you're going to spend so much of your time in this. The second dimension to passion that I kind of discovered along the way, because I was always hiring for the 4 things I'm talking about here.
I love
that.
But
the second part of passion that I thought a lot about is passions are things we're happy to sacrifice for.
Right.
So much of work is about a sacrifice. You're making a lot of sacrifices. So you want to be happy about those sacrifices. And there are things in life we're happy to sacrifice for. And so I think your work ought to be one of those.
What would you choose to do with your time?
Yes. And is there more to it than just making money and a paycheck and all the rest? So there's a whole lot to it. But here's what's so important about that dimension that Dave is. One of the things I loved about Truett Cathy Chick-fil-A, they wanted me to be successful in all aspects of my life.
Yes.
So let's play this out. If you're drained by what you're doing all day, if you're not that good at it, you're not talented to do it, so you got to really push yourself. If your battery is drained, one day you might get married. One day you might have kids. One day you might want to contribute back to the community. What kind of spouse shows up at night if you've been drained by what you did all day? What kind of father, in my case, shows up at night if you've been drained by what you did all day? What kind of, if you got to spend all your nights and your weekends recuperating from work, you got no energy left to be successful in what's really important in life. Your family,
most important
your friends, contributing back to the community. But by contrast, if you're energized by what you did all day at work, What kind of spouse shows up? What kind of dad shows up? You got plenty of energy to give back to the community, to spend time with your friends and all that. If your battery is being
coach
charged.
Little League
So this is so key to the whole thing.
That's huge.
To be successful, not just at work, but outside of work. But at work, you're like the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
You just keep going and going because you're really good at what you're doing and you're really energized by what you're doing. So it's like you don't want to leave at the end of the day. You're having too much fun. And Troy used to say, if you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. So I felt like I never worked a day in my life.
So you had that conversation with Dave, and he's giving you these 4 points.
He said, if you'll find these 4 things,
right,
money will never be your problem.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
He was so right. But here's where it got really hard. So at that point, the scales kind of fell from my eyes, so to speak. I said, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has all 4 of those. That's why I'm struggling. But I also had to accept as a trade-off, back to the passion. I had to be willing to sacrifice. So in the time I graduated, Brittany, nowadays, a lot of kids live with their parents for a while and that kind of, but in the day that I grew up in, if you lived with your parents after college graduation, you might as well have tattooed a big L on your forehead for loser. You were a loser. I had to live at home for 2 years because I was making so little money, and I would never trade it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. That was so valuable. That sacrifice was so worth it to get those 4 things and get launched into the career and be part of the story.
Right.
To be part of. So I tell people, instead of finding the job I could retire from early, I found something 1,000 times better, something that most people are not looking for.
Something that you didn't want to retire from.
That's the point. I found the job I wouldn't want to retire from.
Right. That's good.
But I wasn't looking for that.
That's really
I was looking
good.
for just the opposite. And you'll find what you're looking for.
You really will. I mean, it's like when you start car shopping and then you see the car that you're looking for everywhere you drive. I read that book by Marcus Buckingham, Now Go Put Your Strengths to Work. And he he recommends you keep a 3x5 index card on your desk. And you just every 15 minutes glance at the clock and write down what you were doing and whether or not you noticed time passing. And if you are looking at the clock and it feels grueling, like the clock is ticking so slowly, then you're probably not operating in your strengths. But if time passes and you catch yourself missing those 15-minute windows because you're so engrossed in whatever it is that you're doing, then that's a strength. A strength is something that you're naturally talented at, but that you also enjoy. Where the time passes
and you're naturally gifted to do it. So a little bit of energy goes a long way in the areas of our talent and strength.
So how, in that first job at Chick-fil-A, how were you able to use what you were naturally gifted at?
Such a good question. And maybe just a little more context. Chick-fil-A was not a startup, but it was really close when I started it. We were in a converted air freight warehouse down near the original Dwarf House.
Right.
The big, beautiful campus and headquarters, none of that existed at the time. We were in literally a converted air freight warehouse, tin roof, tin walls, pretty small because there wasn't a lot of people on the side. They run out of room in the warehouse, so they cut a hole through the wall, pulled up a mobile home, and my first office was in a mobile home attached to an air freight warehouse.
Wow.
That was Chick-fil-A.
You've seen the entire growth trajectory. That's amazing.
But that was part of the sacrifice, too. That's why they couldn't pay me very much, because it was still a small,
startup,
scrappy, growing organization. But, and at the time, if your goal at 21 is to retire early and you're sitting in a mobile home attached to a warehouse, that doesn't seem like a very good place to start. But it was the perfect place to start. And literally, they had just started a marketing department January of my senior year in school. I started in June. So I was the second person. They hired a director of marketing, a guy named Steve Robinson. Then I was the second person hired into the marketing department. And the 2 of us were in the mobile home.
You were the marketing department.
And so it was an interesting time because people view Chick-fil-A now as this big, successful organization. It was not even close to that at the time, which was the gift of it, really, because at that point, we were only in shopping malls. 100% of Chick-fil-A locations were in shopping malls.
I remember a Chick-fil-A in a shopping mall.
All of them were in shopping malls at that point. And the operator model was in existence, so operators got paid with half the profit of their location. Well, we had, at any given month, maybe 40% of our locations were unprofitable.
Whoa.
And that's what I said.
That's
whoa.
A lot.
I tell people that at Chick-fil-A today, they can't even believe it. I don't think there's one in the world that's unprofitable, but it was not uncommon. My second year at Chick-fil-A, Truett went an entire year, didn't take a salary
Wow.
because resources were that scarce. And so we used to, bemoan,
But you were on a mission.
but we were on a mission.
Right.
And the gift of that too, like for my first 10 years, 100% of the people I hired took a cut and pay to come.
That's incredible.
But
They caught the vision.
Exactly. But I had to get good at selling the vision. See, this was part of it too, is I had to figure out a way to convince people to come to work for a company and take a cut and pay to come. But one of the good things was, guess who else technically didn't, but took a cut and pay to come? I did.
Yeah, because
I
you
took
could
70% less, than I could have made coming out of college. So I was living out what I was asking them to do.
Yeah.
But what it tended to do is it screened out the mercenaries from the missionaries. And what we really needed to get that thing started was a bunch of missionaries who were bought into the mission, excited about the mission, passionate about the mission, and very talented to pursue the mission. And so we went for, 10 years hiring people, taking a cut and pay. But now, I think the flip side is true now. They can offer so much to people. It may undermine it in the end because you can attract a lot of the mercenaries now because you can afford them.
Right. So how do you keep that mission-minded genesis of a brand? I mean, to me, you probably had to not only to sell the vision, but get people who were builders, who were naturally ingrained to go from 0 to 1, starters and dreamers. And how do you keep those people excited even?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you kind of how I got trained because it'll kind of answer your question. So my first 10 weeks at Chick-fil-A, this is the smartest thing they ever did for me.
Okay.
They sent me out with a group. There were some college students that they had a thing called the Blitz team. And even though I graduated, they put me with a couple of college students. Our job was to visit 10 locations in 10 weeks and get sales up that week. Our goal was to get sales up
grassroots
at double digit. And every place we went, that was the goal. Brittany, in 10 out of 10 locations, we got sales up double digit. In 4 of those 10, we got sales up triple digit in 1 week.
100%. That's
more than 100%
more than 100%.
in 1 week. Now, what that did for me is what I found in life is people focus on what they feel like they can control. And a lot of our operators in those locations felt I can control my labor costs, I can control my food costs, they were focused on what they didn't feel like they could control sales. Sales felt like they just happened. So what my job was to prove to myself first that sales were controllable and prove to them in their own location that sales were controllable in their location because we just got them up in front of your very eyes for a week. So it's like brilliant.
Were you trained to do that?
No,
or
I had to figure it out.
Was that your natural gifting and talent?
I think that was one of my talents. I've always been attracted to startups and entrepreneur and that kind and I like creative and innovative things. So this is like perfect for me. But what I left realizing, the reason it was such great training for me is the rest of my career, I was convinced sales are as controllable as everything else. But if you're not convinced of that, you're not going to spend the time and effort it takes.
Yeah, you saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
You had that firsthand experience.
And what seemed like a burden at first became a blessing, after a while, because it's like I would visit these guys and they're not making any money and their income depends on them being profitable. And so when I would show up, it's kind of like being from the government. I'm from the IRS and I'm here to help. It's like they're not so sure about that because in their minds, I'm the reason they can't put food on their table. I'm the reason they can't pay their rent is Chick-fil-A Done Me Wrong song is what they would play for me.
Right.
But then we got their sales up. Then all of a sudden they tell other operators, you need to invite this guy in. Now I'm making money. And we would do the things necessary and then word of mouth would start to spread. And we're able to really go from being, the person they're not so sure they want visiting to the one, man, you need to invite this guy in because now you can get your sales up. Now you can make a profit. And it's funny, Brittany, as soon as they got sales up enough to make a profit, profits were never the problem. I mean, they would just like really build on that at that point.
Well, because I think awareness does so much of the work in the front end, and and customers that aren't aware can't buy your product.
Yeah. Well, another thing that I learned at that point, as I told you, we were only in shopping malls.
Right.
And shopping malls are what we called a captive audience. We labeled our marketing captive audience marketing. And so in a captive audience, what we realized is what you needed to do is give them a stimulus to respond to. Give them a stimulus to respond to. And so we would do things like sampling. Chick-fil-A at that point was known for sampling. Literally, the thing Chick-fil-A is most known for was people with plates, chicken on toothpicks, and we'd be out sampling. We'd be out doing product demonstrations.
Okay.
We'd do mall employee contests. You know, part of my shtick, I guess you would call it, when I went to visit operator, I said, you need to envision yourself as the mayor of the mall. That if the mall was going to have an election, you'd be elected mayor. So how are you out kissing babies and shaking hands? And,
Yes,
and literally
I love
later
that.
on in my career, when I go visit operators, walk down
And
the mall,
getting to
it's
know
like you're with a
people.
celebrity.
Yeah, that's so true.
And it was so cool to see all that. But here's the thing that struck me that summer. I remember saying, I'm glad I'm working for Chick-fil-A, because I'd look at the card store, I'd look at the shoe store, I'd look at the jewelry store. I say, if my job was to get sales up in those locations in 1 week, it'd be really hard to do. But what went through my mind is I said, people are going to eat somewhere today, every day.
Right.
All I got to do is give them a stimulus to respond to, so they eat with me while they're here.
That's right.
We later, this was intuitive at the time, but we later had the research to prove that 70% of eating in a mall is impulsive.
Interesting.
So all you got to do is give them something to respond to.
Right.
And I'll never forget, so many times I'd be out sampling, give somebody sample. They'd walk down the mall. 5 minutes later, they're coming back. And it's kind of like Lay's potato chip. You can't eat just one, and it's like they come making a beeline, because once they got it in their mouth,
Right,
now
you whet their appetite.
Yeah.
That's true. And Chick-fil-A is craveable.
Yeah.
And that's what's really great is the original chicken. Was it the original chicken
Yeah, it was
sandwich?
the original chicken sandwich, and the nuggets. And
Right. I crave that weekly,
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
twice a week.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you learned that sales were controllable.
Yes.
And you started applying that. Talk about just the evolution of that mall concept going to freestanding units.
Such a good question. So at one point, we started building freestanding locations. That was about 1986. And then our marketing needed to change, because we were no longer a captive audience. We're now a destination.
Right.
And so we needed to change our thinking and morph our thinking. What kind of marketing does a destination need? And that led to the cow campaign.
Yes, let's
because we
talk about the
realized-
cows. I love it.
So we realized that we were going to need to do more traditional marketing. But one of the keys, I think, to the whole thing is we needed to compete at something that we could that we could dominate. And at that point, we didn't have near the location. We didn't have near the funds of a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a KFC or whatever. We weren't going to out TV McDonald's.
Right.
And we were regional. And so we needed to find a medium that we could dominate. And what we discovered when we were visiting like Orlando and California, there were 3D billboards.
Oh,
And
yes.
everybody was using 3D billboards like related to theme parks, but nobody was using them as a branding tool.
Interesting.
So the big aha moment, they said, we could dominate billboards. At that time, billboards were just like next exit, turn left or whatever. But we said we wanted to not use them as a directional billboard, but use it to build a brand.
Right. Storytell.
So we had this vision of we could afford it, we could dominate it in certain cities, and we could be original, because no one else at that point was using 3D billboards outside of Orlando or LA,
That's
for
a good
theme parks.
blueprint.
And so we then decided that we were going to go on a journey. We created a project we called Market 1999. This was the early 90s. And
Okay.
we said, let's envision what marketing should look like in 1999. And let's do it now. Let's overinvest now for what we think it should look like then. So by the time we
Oh,
get
I love
to that point,
Yeah.
that we'll know what to do. Because we envisioned 1999, we may have more freestanders than we've got malls. But that wasn't the case at the time.
Right.
So we picked 3 markets that we were going to make our Market 1999 markets. And we had to have an ad agency who could kind of go on the journey with us, because the ad agency we had at the time was more in-mall stuff. It's point of purchase kind of stuff. It's not, TV. It's not billboards, it's not radio, that
So you went on a search for the perfect partner.
Yeah, and this is where the story gets interesting, because we're a little guy, and I'm a 21-year-old kid who got hired out of college. I don't have any experience in doing any of this, but what we wanted to be scrappy.
Right.
We wanted to be entrepreneur. We were really good at being scrappy, really, and we said, you know what? Let's learn from the best. And it just turns out that we were a big Coca-Cola user, and Coca-Cola's in our own hometown in
Yes,
Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia.
So we asked them, could you tutor us on how to do advertising, how to select an ad agency. And they were thrilled to be asked. So I got tutored by the CMO.
People want to help you.
Oh, they want to help.
They do.
Especially if you're a customer of theirs.
Yes.
So we spent a lot of time with the CMO of Coke, and he literally, they had little books that they had created about how they picked ad agencies.
Oh,
they
cool.
even had a list of 120 ad agencies that they thought were some of the best. Now, here's where it also got interesting, as you know, being an agency business.
Yeah.
Once an agency has a client, they really can't take on another client in that same field. So we're able to quickly narrow that 120 list down to 20 that didn't have a conflicting fast food.
Okay.
But here's what gets interesting again.
I love it.
We are not a very attractive client, because at that point, if you looked at the list of 200 top fast foods, we're probably close to 100 down the list. So if you're a great ad agency, you don't want number 100, you want the top 10. And we're not the top 10.
And you were going for big agencies that represented
good
top
agencies,
10.
very talented.
Okay.
So we said, we got to have a different approach. We got to be scrappy. We got to be entrepreneurial. And so what we decided to do is I personally went and visited all 20 agencies.
Wow, David.
Yeah, it was amazing because we want to get to know them, but we also knew we can't go the traditional route. And I'll never forget, the agency we eventually selected was a group called the Richards Group out of Dallas, Texas, privately held ad agency by a guy named Stan Richards, who owned it. And I sat down with Stan and I was looking at him like I'm looking at you now. And I said, Stan, we may never be your biggest customer. We will probably never write you the biggest check. Let's be honest. Stan, we want to be your best client. Right. What does it look like to be your best client? We'd rather be that than the one that writes you the biggest check. Well, his eyes lit up. He started talking. I'm taking good notes and that kind of thing. And now I know what it looks like to be their best client. We're going to work toward that. So Stan came to my retirement party.
Interesting.
And he told me that. He said, David, you never were our biggest client. He said, but you were definitely our best. And they were a $200 million ad agency at the time.
Wow.
At the time of my retirement party, they were a $1 billion ad agency. He said, let me tell you. He said, the difference between 200 million and $1 billion, almost all of that is attributed to the work we did for Chick-fil-A. He said, every time we take on a new client, they would say, we want a cow campaign like Chick-fil-A. So he said, even though you never wrote us the biggest check, you're the one that enabled us to grow. And so I think there's a real lesson in that, because probably most of the people listening to this aren't the biggest client, can't write the biggest checks.
Right.
But doesn't mean you can't get the best work.
Well, and it also doesn't mean that you can't have the best idea.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, and you talked about this, or I've heard you say, like the gift of poverty or having to be resourceful, being scrappy, that actually unlocks creativity. If you have all of the resources in the world and you can pull off the biggest campaign financially or hire the biggest agency financially, you might not get the best ideas. Being the best client, however, being the best relationship.
When you're the best client, people are lined up wanting to work on your account and all the rest. But there's a little more to the story too, because I want to really inspire, especially people who aren't in a position to just go write the biggest checks. So after having personally visited, what we decided to do is totally reinvent the process of bringing on an ad agent. The normal process is they pitch you. And a lot of agencies at that time, they spend like $100,000, 6 figures to pitch your business. So it costs them a lot to pitch you. And we knew most agencies were too small.
You took that burden off.
So we said, you know what? We're going to pay you to pitch us.
Oh, I like
and all three of them said, no one's ever offered to do that. And we said, but the reason we're going to do it is we want to honor you. We want to value your time. And we want to see what it's like to work with you. Mm-hmm. So we're going to give you a 30-day window to work on our account as if we'd already hired you. And the books are open. We're going to answer every question, any question. We don't want you to have to mysteriously figure out what we're thinking or what we're looking for. So we literally had 3 agencies that we hired for 30 days. We paid them to do a project, gave them all exactly the same project, and gave them all the exact same opportunity. It's interesting. One of them we never heard from again till the 30 days was over and they make the pitch. But the Richards group fully embraced it. We're on the phone every day with them, and they were doing all their research, doing all their homework.
Good. Yeah.
And the interesting thing, Brittany, when they came to do their pitch 30 days later, because we did have them do a pitch.
Yeah.
All the pitches were fantastic. But one of the organizations stood out, and that was the Richards group. And it ended up being more of a culture decision than just, are you capable of doing the work? It's, where do we have the most chemistry? Where do we have the good relationships and that? Because we knew long term, we wanted to work with them long term.
Right.
And we wanted to have kind of had a sampling opportunity, so to speak, of working with them.
Hey, that's the Chick-fil-A sampling approach in the agency. I love it. That's great.
And so we ended up picking the Richards Group.
Yeah.
Long story, they started developing 3D billboards. The cow campaign was not one of those up front.
I was
kind of
going
worked
to
our way
ask.
toward that. But we eventually got there. And then, the Richards Group developed the cow campaign as a result of that. And the rest, as they say,
is history.
is history. But it was a culture. And I think we worked against all odds. We weren't a desirable client. Mm-hmm. We didn't do a traditional process. We paid them to do work normally they'd have to do for free. And I feel like, one other little dimension, because I really want to show people, what does this look like?
Yeah.
So the other thing is, when we selected them to be our agent, the normal thing, you'd call them and let them know. Mm-hmm. And we had picked up along the way that the Richards Group had a tradition that when they got a new client, they had 3 stories on the top of a building out in Dallas, but they had hollowed out each of the floors so they could see through all the floors. And they had what they called stairwell sessions, was their tradition. Whenever a big announcement was made, Stan would call a stairwell. They'd all come out to the railings.
Yeah.
And he would make the announcement. So unbeknownst to Stan, I got with his administrative assistant and we called a stairwell, and we showed up with a bunch of our Chick-fil-A folks and a bunch of Chick-fil-A food, and we made the announcement.
That is so fun.
And we fed them all.
Oh, I love it.
You talk about, you only get one chance to make a good first impression.
That's right.
After that, Stan said everybody in the office wanted to work on our account. All their best talent wanted to work on it. Mm-hmm. Stan was highly motivated. So right from the get-go, we were quickly becoming their favorite client because we were treating them differently than anyone else had ever treated them.
Well, because, the agency serves in this unique role of being the first neck to strangle, so to speak. And so there's this timidity, I think, that sometimes agency, they constantly have to be impressive.
Yes.
And I think that there's something good about that. If you're on a football team and you're on the starting 11, there's someone on the sideline that can take your position any minute.
Yes.
And so you have to put points on the board and you have to move the ball down the field. And so I think there's a results-driven culture that's good. We have to perform in the market that we're in. But if we don't do that relationally, then it's just a transaction.
The other thing is, there's something to be said for longevity and loyalty.
Yes.
We're in the fast food business. It's like the ultimate transactional, culture. The average manager of a normal fast food restaurant turns over about every 6 months.
Yeah.
So 200% a year. The average employee in a fast food restaurant turns over 500% a year.
Wow.
At Chick-fil-A, in an industry known for turnover, we were the exact opposite. We had a 97% retention rate of our corporate staff, 97% retention rate of the operator who's running the location, kind of the equivalent to the manager that turns over 200%. Mm-hmm. Imagine what you get from having that kind of loyalty and stability. Well, we had the same thing with a lot of our suppliers.
That's right.
Like, we worked with the Richards Group, almost the entire time from the time we hired them, to the time I left. And it's like, that's longevity and loyalty. There's something to be said for that too, rather than just put the next person in the game.
That's right. That's right. Because I think when you value that relationship, you kind of, you give yourself room to fail, and failure is not necessarily a bad thing. Failure ends up teaching you.
Yes.
And so double down on some of the misses in marketing. I think it's a lot like baseball.
The minute you get rid of somebody, then you got to spend time finding a new one, training the new one, onboarding.
Right.
There's a lot of cost associated with continuous turnover in your system.
And I think that's so good, David, because the pressure to do great work, we're all learning. And, I had a client one time tell me marketing's like baseball. And so you get up to the plate and if you hit it 3 out of 10 times, you're in the MLB Hall of Fame. And so we do want those home runs. I think I bet a lot of people have said, how do we get the cows? How do we do a campaign like Chick-fil-A did? But not every campaigin is that successful.
And my advice to them is, you better become the favorite client.
You better become the favorite client.
Because in the ad business, especially, agencies get treated like slaves. It's kind of like, I'm writing you the big checks, I'm the master, you're the slave, and they treat them in a belittling way, and and then they try and outsmart them. I can't tell you how many CMOs I've seen where they question all the decisions, and it's like they want to outsmart the creatives and be more creative than the creatives. We didn't hire them to do that.
Yeah. Well, you trusted them.
Yes.
So, and Andy always says like trust is currency.
Yes.
And the end of the day, and relationships are wealth. Like we're all on the same team, working toward the same mission, the agency and client. It's so important to be missionally aligned.
Yes.
And to trust your partners.
Yes.
That's so good. I love that. Okay. Chick-fil-A is a big brand, but you have learned so much about culture, I would say, at Chick-fil-A. How did you do that in the years? How did you instill
a great question.
Culture?
What's interesting, I retired from Chick-fil-A 7 years ago, and I get called back on a number of occasions for different things. But what was interesting to me is the pattern. 95% of the time when I get called back, it's not about marketing.
Right.
It's about culture. And I was scratching my head saying, I was never in charge of culture at Chick-fil-A. I was never in the HR department. It's like, why do they keep calling me back about culture?
Interesting.
And I kind of made a discovery. What I was in charge of was brand, the brand. And I realized that brand and culture are kind of two sides of the same coin. It's two portals to look at your brand. I think about the brand portal is a customer's view of your business.
Right.
The culture portal is your employee's view of your business, but it needs to be the same business. It's just different portals that people look at.
That's right.
And so the person that understands the story and understands the brand can be good at both.
That's right.
But what you don't want is your marketing department disconnected from your culture. I feel like the greatest cultures create the greatest brands. As one person said, I've never seen a great brand created out of a mediocre culture.
Oh, that's good. And is it Peter Drucker that says culture eats strategy for breakfast? Yes. That's good.
Yeah. And so I realized I kind of became an expert on the Chick-fil-A brand, but by definition, I was now becoming an expert on the Chick-fil-A culture in a sense.
Yeah.
And the great cultures grow the great brands.
Do you think that's because of how you treated people? You talked about how you treated the Richards group. Is that where the Chick-fil-A culture was birthed?
Yeah. Well, I feel like culture is such an amorphous thing, which is a bit like brand.
Yeah.
Most people don't know how to define a brand. There are a lot of definitions of brand.
Yeah.
There are a lot of definitions of culture. But I feel like, there's a famous quote Albert Einstein loved, not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts.
Right.
And I think a brand and a culture can't be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet.
No, that's true.
The richness of it is the fact they can't be reduced. Because if it could be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet, everybody can make the same calculations. But there are these things in life that are important, that are more emotional than rational. And brands are more emotional. Cultures are more emotional. And I even used to think of culture like I went through that 10 years of hiring people where they had to take a cut and pay, the tangible part.
Right.
And I realized the true riches in life never show up in your paycheck anyway. It's the richness of relationships. It's the richness of the experiences we have. It's the richness of the mission we're on. And so what we want to do is be plentiful in the true riches in life, both as a brand and as a culture. And I used to tell people that I hope when your time at Chick-fil-A is over, that you can look me in the eye and tell me the least important thing I ever got from Chick-fil-A was my paycheck.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What a goal.
And I can tell you the least important thing I ever got from Chick-fil-A was my paycheck. So if you think about it that way, in my mind, culture are all those things you value beyond your paycheck.
Yes, that's good.
And a brand are all those things you value beyond just what
product.
You pay.
Right.
The product.
Well, and I think you've replicated the culture and the brand of Chick-fil-A at Rome.
Yes.
We office out of Rome in Buckhead in Atlanta, and it's such an amazing experience. It's the details and the thoughtfulness and the talented staff that you hire at Rome. Do you feel like you've been able to translate what you learned at Chick-fil-A into this next venture?
100%. That's really what the journeys that I'm on now. I retired from Chick-fil-A 7 years ago, as I told you. And a lot of people say, well, if you found the job you wouldn't want to retire from, why did you retire?
Right.
And it's like, well, I don't feel like I did retire.
You didn't retire from the work.
One of the things I've done in retrospect is a lot of people think about a career. And a career is a little self-serving way of thinking about it. I feel like what my career is my contribution to the world. If you go into your career as your contribution, You never want to stop at least I don't. I want to keep contributing to the day, to my last day.
Right.
And so, yes, I'm no longer contributing at Chick-fil-A, but I can take what I learned at Chick-fil-A and contribute it to the rest of the world. And so I told Dan, Kathy, when I retired, because Truett had already passed at that point, I said, Dan, my mission is not changing. My mission field is expanding beyond Chick-fil-A. Because my last year, Brittany, at Chick-fil-A, 80,000 people applied for 100 openings.
Wow.
And as Andy Stanley would say, what breaks my heart is the fact, what are those other 79,900 people going to do? And I feel like to those who much is given, much is required. So I feel like I was given so much during my 37 years at Chick-fil-A. What's now required of me is to go out and recreate for other people the incredible business experience I got to enjoy.
I love that.
At Chick-fil-A. And so my wife would tell you I'm miserably failing retirement. I'm 7 years out of Chick-fil-A. I've got 7 businesses I'm now involved with.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
one
crazy.
of which is Rome. For
one of the 7.
Of you listening, Rome is a collaborative workspace. I say we compete with coffee shops for co-working. We compete with the WeWorks of the world for flex office space. And we compete with hotels for off-site meeting space. So it's kind of all that under one roof is what Rome is all about. But basically what we're doing is recreating the Chick-fil-A culture in the context of a different business. So people come into Rome all the time and say, this kind of reminds me of Chick-fil-A. And that's like the ultimate compliment. Even Chick-fil-A people now spend a lot of time, and they tell me that, and it's like, well, that's the ultimate compliment. That's what we're trying to do, is recreate that culture. We think of, what if you could create the Ritz-Carlton of office buildings, so to speak, where you had high hospitality in the context of your office.
Right. And who wouldn't want to work in that environment?
Bingo.
That's good. Man, this has been such a fascinating conversation, and I'm so blessed and so honored that you would join us here today, David. This is a fun question, a surprise question, but do you remember the first story as a child that you kind of carried with you? Is there a storybook or a fable that has stuck with you in your years?
First story. Well, it was actually an experience. I'm going to answer your question a little different because it wasn't as much a story. I don't really have a lot of recollection of stories, but in elementary school, I was a very mediocre student. Like in the time I went through elementary school, they put everybody in the A, B, and C category. The A were the smart kids, the B were the okay kids, and I was in the B category.
Okay.
Throughout my elementary school. And then in 7th grade, which at that time was elementary school, I didn't have middle school. We went straight from 7th to high school. I got an award for history from my history teacher, like the fun. History student. It's the first time in my life I remember not being labeled, a C student, like a middle ground student. And that just changed my whole trajectory in life. The fact that one of my teachers saw me as excelling at something.
I love that. Yes.
I'd never had that experience.
To be seen.
And I remember, I still got the little certificate to this day.
That's sweet.
But that was the first time I felt like maybe I could be more than a mediocre person and student.
To me, that's the value we have as leaders, is to speak that kind of life into people.
Yes.
We had a client one time tell us, hey, I'm going to practice some feedback as oxygen. And I was like, feedback as oxygen? Like, it was such a novel statement. I had to think about it. But that's when we speak life into people.
Yes.
We're literally breathing just how they view themselves. Like, we're speaking the truth about them and over them as young people. So it's what an opportunity. I love that your teacher did that.
Yeah. Betty Hamilton. I even remember her name.
Betty Hamilton, Miss Hamilton. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us today. I look forward to many, many more conversations to come as we do life together.
It's an honor, and it was my pleasure.
Thank you.